left-handed knitting, also called continental style knitting, is it's a form of knitting with your left hand as opposed to your right hand. People that are left-handed are probably going to find this method a little bit easier than using their right hand. Also crocheters will probably find this easier too, since most crocheters they have the yarn coming from their left hand instead of their right hand. The first step to continental style is figuring out which finger you want to use to tension your yarn. Most people use their ring finger. What they'll do is wrap the yarn around the ring finger and then have it come over top of the index finger. Just like that. I'll show you that again. Wrap around your ring finger and then up over your index finger. That's the way that I find it most comfortable. I'm not a continental knitter. I've always knit with my right hand, and whenever I try to switch over to continental, it just does not work for me because my tension is just too loose. I'm not very good with my left hand in general. I'm a right-handed person, so this is not the style for me, but it might be for you if you're a left-handed person or a crocheter. So to perform the basic knit stitch, you're going to get yourself set up with your yarn end back, and you're going to take your right needle and you're going to stick it in. There's a front side to a loop and a back side to a loop. With the knit stitch, we're going to the back side of the loop, and we're going to go inside of it all the way to the back. Let me show you that again. We're on the back side of the loop, and we're going to go into it to the back. And we're going to, so with right-handed knitting, what they do is wrap the yarn around. For continental knitters, it's a little bit easier. They don't have to do that whole wrapping motion. So what they do is they stick their needle in, they grab onto the yarn leaning to the left. So they're not going in and grabbing it like this. They're going over the yarn and pressing their needle to the right. So right here, this is a very important part. This is where your tension comes into play. So you're taking your needle and you're grabbing onto it, and now this is where you're going to keep your yarn tight with that ring finger. And you're going to pull that yarn through. And once you have the yarn through the loop, you're going to take the original loop off of the left-hand needle. And you have your first stitch. So now let's do it again. So when you have, when you start knitting and you have work over here on the right hand, you're going to want to keep your index finger on your last stitch on this needle. This is going to keep it from sliding around and trying to slide off the needle, and it's going to help you to perform the next stitch. So keeping it tight on the needle here, we're going to go in through the back again. We're going to grab that yarn. It also helps if you're moving your index finger up and down. Moving it up like that. And now we're going to pull that yarn through the loop. And then we're going to take the original stitch off of the needle. Just like that. When you stick, I'm trying to get closer here. When you stick your needle in through the back, you're kind of making a window for you to pull the yarn through. Ooh, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it on camera. you're opening the stitch up, going in, grabbing that yarn, and pulling it through. And then take the original stitch off of the left-hand needle. Again, holding on to this so everything's not sliding around. Oh, this is so awkward. Holding onto the stitch, going into the back, lifting this index finger up, and pulling that yarn through with the right hand needle, and then taking the original stitch off the left hand needle. Okay, now for purling. Purling is quite difficult, especially for me. So for purling, you have to, purling is the opposite stitch of the knit stitch. It's literally just a backwards knit stitch. So we have the yarn in back, and now we're gonna pull the yarn through the needles to the front, just like this. Let me tighten up here. And now instead of going through the back of the stitch like we were, we're gonna go through the front of the stitch to the front of the needle. For the knit stitch, we were going through the back of the stitch to the back of the needle. For the purl stitch, we're going through the front of the stitch to the front of the needle. Use more yarn. And now we're wrapping in that same motion counterclockwise. And this is where things get tricky. In order to get this loop out, you're gonna have to take your index finger and press down on the yarn. And then pull it through. And then take the original stitch off the needle. So whenever you have to switch back and forth between the two, let's say I have to do one more purl stitch and then I have to do a knit stitch. I'm gonna do my purl, and then I'm gonna bring my yarn between the needles to the back again, and then I'm gonna go through the back of the loop to the back of the needle and do the knit stitch. And then if I have to go back to a purl, bring the yarn between the two needles to the front, left hand, right hand needle into the front of the stitch to the front of the needle, and do the purl stitch. And then I'll switch back to a knit stitch and purl stitch. And that is Continental style knitting.